Yes, two Johns and a Giga. Yeah. So today we're going to talk about all kinds of stuff. Elites, which is coming out tomorrow officially. We have Forbidden Power, like you said earlier, which is the Age of Sigmar expansion. The Riot Quest from Privateer Press. Contrast paints, as well as the title of the day, which is that we are going to be one of the very few Gen Con pop-up stores in its inaugural year.
Yeah, so it's a new program that they're rolling out for Gen Con, and I want to say it's done by one of the biggest distributors out there, which is going to be Alliance. But John, if you could fill us in with what exactly it's going to entail and what people can look forward to.
Absolutely. So during the weekend of Gen Con, it's, I believe, August 1st through 4th, something like that.
Right.
The second day, which is, I believe, Friday, basically we will host events that are the same as what's at Gen Con, as well as hosting some of the games that Alliance is distributing at Gen Con. So you'll be able to get your hands on some of the stuff without having to go all the way up to Indianapolis. So basically we have tickets that go on sale, and if you are one of a select groups that gets to get your hands on a ticket, which I guess is open to the public at some point soon, you'll be able to get priority for these certain demos, as well as cool swag and stuff like that. I guess it's not swag, because swag means stuff we all get, but it's only for those with tickets that get the cool swag.
Correct.
So, yeah, it's going to be fun, and that means that for those of you who don't want to travel for the, 8.5-hour trip, if you're driving up to Indy, you don't have to do that. So, yeah, we're one of 40 stores across the country, I believe, that gets to do that.
Yeah, so
it's pretty exciting.
It's a great opportunity, and for a lot of folks, the big reason to go to Gen Con is the pre-releases and to see the new things. And now having that accessible in your back door, especially to some people who don't have the budget or time budget to make it out to Indianapolis, this can be a great way to kind of experience what the hype is about for Gen Con. And it's super gracious, or we're super gracious to both the Gen Con staff and Alliance for choosing us for this. And I hope it's an absolute success. So, yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be fun. And we are going to have demo games all throughout the day that you'll be able to play and try out. And I guess you can also pre-order those games that are demoed there that normally are not available to the public. I believe it's like a special pre-order period that those of you with tickets, I think, I have to re-verify because I only read it through twice. So I had to make sure I read it through a bunch of times before I really get it in my head. But I believe you can pre-order things that would normally be only gotten at Gen Con.
Right. And so to me, that's a huge deal. Being able to get your toys early is half the fun of Gen Con. So, and then the events are usually the other half. So we have them both here in Atlanta. I love it. But basically, as we get closer to the actual Gen Con dates, which is the first weekend of August, we'll be having more information. And the moment we know tickets go up for sale, or when tickets will be going up for sale, we will, of course, let you guys know.
And it'll be through Gen Con's website. So we won't be doing anything through playatgiga.com. It'll be purely through gencon.com and then their portal.
Yeah.
So we'll let you know, and we'll give you a link that you'll be able to go to get our tickets.
And for those guys who are interested, or those people who are interested in taking part in our pop-up event, that will be, I want to say we are currently scheduled 10 a.m. through 11 a.m. on that August 3rd is our pop-up store time. But that's all tentative. It can change. But if you are interested and you don't have an account right now on the Gen Con website, go ahead, take the 2 seconds to make your account, and it'll save you a lot of time, especially when those pop-up tickets go for sale. Not only will you guys be buying tickets for yourself, but all of Atlanta and also the greater Atlanta area, I suspect all the way up to Tennessee, South Carolina, Alabama, Florida, will probably be buying tickets as well to our pop-up store, just simply because we don't know who else in the area will be having one of those. So be sure.
I assume with 40 stores in the country that it would be fairly spread out.
Correct. So. How many states are there?
50.
Weird. Okay, so yeah. We might be the only one in Georgia
for
the greater area. So Please, if you guys are interested, be diligent about it.
And tickets are going to be extremely limited,
Yes.
so yeah, definitely be on the lookout for that, and we'll let you know as soon as we know more information. So we're doing our whole reach out and making sure everything is solidified. So it's gonna be awesome, super fun.
Yeah.
So let's segue from that to new things that are coming to Gigabytes, such as contrast paints and elites. So let's talk about contrast paints for a little bit.
Yeah, so contrast paints were finally revealed last week as to what it was. Games Workshop had been killing it in the advertising department with, multiple movie spoofs hinting at what it could possibly be. And so, those who don't know, contrast paints is a new style of paint from Games Workshop. It's going to be similar, like technicals, whatever, but what you do with it is you take one of their new primers that are coming out, which is going to be basically, I want to say a really light gray, and then an off white, like an eggshell.
Yes,
Um,
eggshell.
and you're going to, prime your models with those. So these are going to be the closest thing to white primer that Games Workshop is going to produce for the contrast paints. And basically, it's going to be, I want to say, almost a semi gloss in terms of the primer. It'll be a nice kind of slick coating, and the contrast paint is a viscous wash, is the easiest way to describe it. So
Ooh, that's good, John. Viscous.
it is a thicker paint, but still very translucent. And what happens is when you apply it over the model, where it collects in the recesses, the cracks, and the crevices, the paint is designed to have the darker pigments go towards the cracks and the crevices. So basically, the darker pigments are going to be heavier than the lighter pigments and collect in the areas where the shadows would naturally form. And then the actual pigments themselves would populate kind of the midtone areas. And where the highlight should be, it'll be more of the medium. So more of that eggshell or light gray will pop through, giving you in one coat of paint both highlights, midtones, and shadows. And so this is a really big deal. No more are there going to be the too thin coat stay, right? You're not going to be layering upon layering upon layering. If you want what Games Workshop says, battle ready, and I like to call it, or what we usually refer to as tabletop standard, or maybe even tabletop standard plus, all you have to do is one coat of the battle ready paint or the contrast paints to have it ready to go and easy to play with. So this is
Yeah, a lot of folks are saying like it's a new tool to
yeah,
use. So for anyone who's a veteran painter, you don't necessarily have time. A lot of folks, have families and all this stuff, and oftentimes if you want to really paint up a model, it's going to take time to get the base coat, the wash, the highlight, and all that stuff. So really, it's the ultimate time saver.
correct. And so what you can do with the contrast paints, one of the nice things about them is that their dry time is actually a little bit longer than, let's say, a normal layer or base paint
Okay.
from Games Workshop. So you can actually very easily blend two colors together on a model. So creating those like subtle transitions and things like that, blocking it in. And then you already have most of your midtones and shadows done. So what you can do after that point is come in and push things a little bit further. Games Workshop has a couple of models that they showed off at the Warhammer Fest last weekend, in which they took the contrast paints and they either added an additional wash to parts of it
hmm
or did like one additional highlight. And it takes it from that kind of like tabletop plus quality and puts it over that, right? It puts it into almost I don't want to say like show quality because it's not quite there yet, but it takes it
Right.
to like beyond tabletop, right? It gives the character a lot of like depth of like color and visual appeal and all of that. So it's really amazing.
So
And
John, there's been a lot of speculation on like what exactly kind of material. Like, is it a glaze? Is it a wash? You mentioned that before. It's kind of a mixture of things.
yeah,
What do you think it's really all made out of?
so witchcraft is the immediate assumption. I don't know enough. So Games Workshop actually did a seminar during Warhammer Fest.
Uh huh.
I kind of read some reports to it because I was interested to see what the science was behind it. But a lot of it is going to be proprietary formulas, right? We know that it is going to operate like a glaze or a wash that are already out there, but the medium itself is going to be a lot like thicker to it. And
Okay.
so it's like the base version of a glaze, right? Like, you know how their base paints are a lot thicker. So
Mm-hmm.
we don't necessarily know what's in it or what is different or how exactly it works. I can only speculate, I'm not a chemist by any stretch of the imagination.
Start to say, do we have any chemists watching the stream? Because if we do, you should totally
Uh,
message us. Be
so
like, oh, I know what all this is about.
one of our own employees, Nathan, he's a chemist, but and this is kind of one of those things where right now it's not Games Workshop rebranding something that already exists on the market, because this
Right.
contrast paint is something wholly designed for a 3D model, like,
Mm-hmm.
so in terms of traditional arts, glazes, washes, all that sort of stuff has existed before in traditional art. So when Games Workshop just kind of packages it for you, it makes it more accessible for a miniature painter. These contrast points, paints, excuse me, these paints are specifically designed for a miniature. So there's nothing really to compare it to right now. And I've been looking through the kind of like paint selection that we have, and even paints that we don't carry. Um, the closest thing I've seen is kind of the Tamiya paints. They sell these like candy shell inks,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a very similar thing where the pink collects together, it gets very very dark. However, a thinner coat of it makes it kind of nice and vibrant and like a saturated color. So like that's what I did to paint some Horus Heresy Thousand Suns with that kind of like
Oh,
candy
okay.
paint color. Is I used that Tamiya ink. But even with that said, I can look at the Games Workshop paints and say, no, this isn't the same, because a lot of the gloss content isn't there. These guys that were painting the contrast paints, I watched videos. Like, I'm really into this.
Oh, yeah. Me
uh,
too. Me too.
I'm super into this. So I spent my weekend watching videos of a lot of the content creators that attended Warhammer Fest to try out these paints, and they don't come across as glossy. They dry very matte, and they look amazing. And I think the only limitation of them is going to be the fact that you can't just like fire and forget it, right? You can't just like slather a model with my like yellow contrast paint, walk away, and come back to a fully painted marine. What's going to happen is the same thing that happens with washes. If you slather it on and you're not paying attention to it, it's going to pool and collect in
Mm.
an area.
And that was going to be my next question to you about, like, classical Primaris Space Marines have the huge shoulder pads. So, do you know from what you've seen, does it end up looking splotchy? Because that's my number one problem with washes, is that there's the whole, like, put a gloss on it first and then let it put a
Yes,
wash on it and it'll be smoother.
yes. So long, long explanation short. Uh, it looks like it's a 50-50. So
Okay.
in like a legit 50-50, not me just saying it either is or it isn't.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it depends on the model itself, but I believe the primer that they're coming out with is actually semi-gloss. So that means it's going to pull over very well. But I have seen examples, both like, and these are people actively painting with it. Some of them have come out splotchy, where others have come out completely clean. And I don't know if that's user error or if it
Like the
is.
same colors?
No, they're different colors, and that's the other thing. I
Mm.
don't know if more colors are going to be temperamental about it, or more
Right.
colors are going to be like smoother. But
Like, my big problem is, like, yellows. I always airbrush my yellows, and then I can't shade them because I'm awful with
correct.
doing a wash on the yellows.
So the yellows themselves, I haven't seen as much splotchiness. The splotchiness
Okay.
comes from I've seen more in the like skin tone area of colors.
Interesting.
Right. And
Hmm.
so it kind of like works to it. Like I've seen it like basically the brighter but less saturated it is, the more splotchy I've seen it. But I don't know if that's just basically the guy who was painting skin tones on things that was doing it versus the guy who was just painting armor panels, right? Um,
Yeah. Because my number one thing would be skin tones. If there's a good contrast for skin tones that I can just put one layer on,
yeah.
like, that will make my day. and then yellows, and then there's another color that I always hate painting. But
Um,
mostly yellows and skin tones are the number one things.
so one of the great things is I want to say it is probably user error. Like that to me would be the natural assumption is that the product is fine. It is the people who are just first exposed to it that are having issues with it.
Hmm.
And I want to say that probably similar to how the like how the other paints work, like layer paints and base paints and all that sort of stuff. Normal acrylics, usually the lighter pigments have a tendency to not mix as well or
Right.
not as intense as some of the darker pigments. So it could be something as simple as they didn't shake their pots well enough to avoid the splotchiness, or how they applied it on a skin tone model. And it's something that we'll have to see and play around with. I'm
Now
hoping.
another thing is the medium cannot be mixed with water, correct?
Correct. It is not mixing it with water is bad juju. So don't do it.
Huh.
Um, and I do, once again, I don't know what the science is. And so for those people like myself who like to lick their brushes, for the love of God, don't do it. Um,
Maybe it could be like a resin type basing or something like that, like a different material that's the medium itself. Because acrylic medium is basically water medium, right? So
yeah.
then the number one thing that's keeping the paint traveling across the surface is the water. Whereas in this case, it might be whatever their special juju is.
Right.
That's all
Um,
any number of things, but typically like a resin or something like that.
yeah. So we don't know, right?
We don't know, right?
And I don't think Games Workshop will probably take as long as they can before they reveal what it's actually consisting of. Um,
Oh yeah, the formula, it's just like Coca-Cola,
yeah.
no one will ever know.
But until we actually get word from them, like if you're a habitual brush licker or if you almost mindlessly water down your paints now, don't do that with the contrast paints because they are something new and unique. And you're talking about how you're having difficulty painting certain colors.
Hmm.
I know for a fact that contrast paints are coming out in a couple of different shades of whites. And also, we know that they're coming out with a black contrast paint as well. And
It
those are
really interesting.
yeah, those are two colors that are usually very difficult.
Hmm.
And I've seen the contrast paint black actually used because I was kind of interested in that. And it is, I wouldn't say black, but it is a really good charcoal gray.
Ah,
Uh,
yeah.
and so the charcoal gray is actually, like, to me, fantastic because what that allows you to do is it lets you actually go to that deeper black. Like this is one of those contrast paints that if I'm painting black, I'll hit it with that contrast paint first, and then I'll come back in with my blacks and thin down the black paint and kind of like shade that in to the
Hmm.
larger areas to like once again give that gradation and give the illusion of lighting. Um, and then
Because the
the
number one thing when someone's doing black is like you have different shades of highlight, right?
right.
And I oftentimes will do like a bluish highlight to the black.
Mhm.
But will this is this one more of a gray highlight? I guess.
Yeah, it'll be more of a slate gray, and once again, it depends on the primer that you use with it as well, because there's two contrast primers. So you could
Right.
have the black become a little bit warmer with the bone, or you can have the black become a little bit cooler with the gray, and that'll just be a choice. And a lot of people will be figuring this out as they're painting. But I definitely like the option, especially for a lot of people who like to play, white scars or what's that? What's the green and white schemed Eldar? I can't remember.
Oh my gosh. Don't
We'll
put me
figure
on
it
the
out.
spot like that.
Yeah, no.
It's not a Lightalk
It might be a
or a
lot.
Laytalk.
Yeah. Either way, we'll figure it out. But also, so if you think about it,
Ulthwain.
Ulthwain, there we go. That sounds right. Sisters of Battle, right? They're coming out soon,
Yeah.
and this is a great way to paint a mostly black army instead of just priming black, doing a base
Oh,
coat.
Bealtan.
Uh, oh, Bealtan. That makes sense. Yeah. Thank you, Jason. Um, we went through every single craft world, and then
Except the one.
yeah, fine. Um, so, but like with armies like Sisters of Battle coming out, where it's going to be mostly black, this is a great way to have a very interesting looking force with
Hmm.
not having to edge highlight every single model. And from someone who has, in fact, done like an entire Dark Eldar army where I had to edge a highlight every single surface, uh,
Everything.
yeah, these contrast paints are an absolute blessing. So I'm really looking forward to them, and I can talk all day about them, and I will, probably on my paint streams. And
Here's what we're going to do, John, and this is for folks watching. Let us know if this is a good idea. We're going to take a 1-hour stream, kind of like this, where you use the regular painting method, or I'll use the regular painting method, and then the other person uses the contrast paints, and we see how quickly we can get a standard tabletop quality in an hour.
okay, yeah, I'll have to do the contrast
You
paints
do the contrast.
because if I do my standard painting, I will. I spent an hour and a half yesterday, and I finished one full goblin face.
Oh, okay. Yeah, in that case, I'm pretty much... Like, my blending is the equivalent of stirring with a spoon to get a smoothie, so...
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll do the regular painting, and then you can do the contrast, and then people can see after an hour, and that's the big thing to me. Like, all of this awesome like information on it is amazing, but if people can get more painted models on the table, that's a big deal for new players, because all the time you see new folks coming in, especially for Gigabytes. You know, we're a busy store. People come in and they go, oh, that's nice. What is that? Oh, it's a bunch of gray models. No one wants to see that. They want to see this cool, like, badass painted army.
Yeah.
That'd be perfect. No, I mean, when I was a new player, I didn't tell the difference. I couldn't, like, if someone was like, oh yeah, this is a perfectly painted, like, golden demon army, I'd be like, okay, that's great.
Yeah. In the great words of Dallas Kemp, studio painter, his favorite color is done. And so
It's a great quote.
basically, it is always better to have finished an army as opposed to sitting around mulling how to make things look, a very specific way or whatever. Just get it battle ready and done. That's what I'm planning on doing. I have a lot of armies. I don't want to surprise anyone. I work here at the hobby store. I've been here almost 8 years now, and I have played every single game under the sun. So I'm really excited about these paints to more or less let me paint up things quickly to at least a tabletop standard. And if I want to later, I can go back and touch things up and bring things up. But until then, I can just call it done. So before we move on to the final, or before we move on to the next section, not the final section, I just want to do the quick details. The contrast paints are coming out in June. We don't know what date in June, but we have been given the date or the month of June in which they're coming. So should be easy guess that it should be mid-June. Like mid to late June is usually a lot easier to guess at than, let's say, like the first week of June. And there will be 30-something paints coming with the line and 2 primers. Games Workshop said that they are going to have bundles releasing with it, but we don't know if these bundles are actually like a box of paints, or if we are just going to pull one of each paint for you and put it in a bag and say, hey, thank you so much, here you go. So as when we get more information, we will let you know, but we will have some sort of bundle in which you can get one of each of the contrast paints plus one of each of the primers, and we will have that information to you as soon as we get pricing from Games Workshop. So
Oh, and I just got a brilliant idea. We should have a contrast painting competition.
yeah, we'll have that.
So then anyone that wants to, as long as you're using just contrast paints, and maybe, I guess the highlights would be okay to use your own, but mainly contrast paints, and we see what kind of models we can come up with.
Let's call it the Contrast +1 painting competition.
Ooh, I like that.
So we'll do that, and we'll probably tentatively for July, because we don't know exactly when in June they're dropping.
I just have to write that down because I will forget.
Yeah.
Okay. Done. Okay, so now let's talk about Kill Team Elites.
Right, and so Kill Team Elites releases this Saturday. It is the newest expansion for Kill Team, which brings in Elites for all of the armies represented currently in Kill Teams, plus adding a whole new one. Custodes are finally here. And on that note, there's new box sets coming out with Kill Team Elites. But more importantly, John, you actually got your game on last night, right?
We did 2 games in an hour.
Oh, wow.
It was fast. So my friend Jason and I, we played Custodes versus Thousand Sons. And it's a good matchup because Thousand Sons have that psychic stuff going on.
Right.
And Custodes get bonuses against psychic stuff, which is great. It was a good matchup. It happened to go extremely fast for the first match. Simply because we were actually only like 8 inches from each other to begin with. So I like charged him pretty much straight away and blew his face off. But the second one, we just decided to go with a mission that had a lot of objectives, and that was tough because I had 3 models.
Right.
So it's very hard to take objectives when you have 3 bros on the field. The first mission I had 2.
So,
which is interesting because if anyone knows the broken mechanic in Kill Team, you can potentially break if over half your team is off the field or flesh wounded, right?
yeah, but
so then you have to have one of your models at least flesh wounded and gone, and then the other model then has to get flesh wounded, and that by that point you're almost off the table anyway.
Yeah.
So it's very interesting. Going to see what people come up with on that one in terms of their win-loss ratio.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's one of the great things that Games Workshop is doing with Kill Team. And I know they got a lot of gripe from people saying, oh, hey, this is just eventually becoming 40K. But
Right.
when you really think about it, it's not. It is still that small-scale game that still has a lot of more narrative elements to it. And what they're doing is they're just providing you more options. So they're
Right.
keeping the game fresh by adding new content, adding new models to play with, and giving you guys a whole range of things to use. I'm personally really excited for it because, one, I like Thousand Suns, and we're finally getting a box set, but also on top of that, the fact of the matter is, sometimes I just want to run Terminators. Like, what if you had a very fluffy, like, Deathwing army, right? Like, you just want to run Terminators. Or what about the Custodes players that haven't had a chance to play yet? And yeah, you're only going to have 2 models. Those 2 models are going to be phenomenal, but you would have to buy a different army to get into it, whereas this one is going to be enticing for those people that already have that collection. So I, for one, welcome our elite overlords to Kill Team. And I know Ricky has a Kill Team league coming up soon with the elites built into it. I'm going to try to find time to play in leagues.
Do it, John. You got to do it. Come on.
I keep trying.
I believe in you.
So many things to do in the store, and we have so many things planned that I'm constantly working. But I'd love to play. I am picking up the Fractal Blade set, so I will have my Thousand Suns cards and all that sort of good stuff. And I'm just looking forward to kind of taking my time to mod up these Terminators and paint them. And maybe I'll do them in a different color scheme than my normal stuff. Who knows? But
yeah, so that's why I actually got 2 Necron sets. Necron Warriors plus the Triarch Praetorians.
Right.
The Praetorians have a 10-inch movement, which I did not even realize. I was just going to model them because they had powerful weapons. But I didn't realize they had these little grav jetpack things, which the models themselves don't look like. You can't really tell that they have them on until you model it yourself. But these things have a 10-inch movement. So, like, the elites also bring stuff like deep striking into the equation.
Yeah.
So then you can put models in reserve up to half your points, and then with command points, I believe, you have to bring them in outside of 5 inches from an enemy, but it's at the end of the movement phase, and so you don't get to charge if you brought them in from deep strike.
Yeah, well, that makes sense.
Which gives you a lot of flexibility in terms of going against elite armies, but I'm not sure how that's going to work against horde armies, which take up a lot of space.
Yeah. That will be interesting because the board is a lot smaller. So, and if you're fighting against like 20 boys or 20 cult members, it could be
a bunch of rots.
Yeah. Could be pretty difficult. So, but we're excited to be hosting the Kill Team League events and having these models in there. I think my plan is to try to mod my guys to at least be in like different poses than normal. Maybe build up some scenic bases, take some time, and do a nice little like cool scenic terminal.
And don't forget to magnetize, if you can.
Why would I magnetize?
So you have all the different loadouts for your Terminators? Yeah.
Well,
no?
So the Scarab Occult Terminators, the only thing that you really have to magnetize is either your Scarab Occult leader's weapon, like if you want to give him a bolter or a staff and a sword, which I think you're always going to take the bolter. And then the other one is the Soul Reaper autocannon or the Flamer. So, like, maybe that magnetized, but I'm not a big magnetized person. I don't.
The biggest reason to me is that, remember, you're always using your matched play roster. So even if you're using just Terminators, which you only bring like 2 or 3 at a time, maybe 4, then you still have your 20 models to choose from, which gives you that flexibility.
Right. So, but yeah, it's really exciting, and
I'm pumped.
I'll probably do a little like blog post stuff as I'm working on them. Try to give them different poses. I know they're always supposed to be kind of, especially rubrics in general, are supposed to be kind of like slow and blocky and all that, but I kind of want to give them a little
Hmm.
bit more life and such. So kind of
And I like the gold that you have in your paint scheme, like that
yeah,
gold and blue combination that you do
yeah,
is very striking.
yeah. And so maybe I'll try to crack them open and like have some of their like soul dust leaking out. That'd be kind of fun.
Oh yeah, that'd be cool.
That would make probably Jason and Ross happy to see some Scarab Occult broken up on the board. Um,
Yep. It also makes the gameplay faster because you have fewer models to deal with. You
yeah,
know,
and I'm
their
all
stat
about
lines are better, but that's the reason they're more expensive. So, like, we literally did one of our games in 10 minutes.
yeah, which I mean is absolutely great. Let's see. All right.
So that covers elites.
Yep.
Forbidden Power for Age of Sigmar is coming out.
Yeah. So this is the new campaign expansion for Age of Sigmar. It is basically a big narrative event that is leading into this is the next thing that is leading into the next thing. And
Hmm.
so what they've done is since they came out with Age of Sigmar, the second edition, they started with Soul Wars, and everything has been kind of connected to Soul Wars, and the storyline has been progressing. So for those of you who are not up to date, quick recap: Nagash, the god of the dead, basically wants to be the only god out there. That includes all of the mortal gods, you know, what the humans, the elves, and everyone else believes in, and the chaos gods. So Gash came up with this grand scheme to basically seize control from everyone. And then at the last minute, the Skaven, the Rat Men, kind of got stuck in the gears of his great plan. And instead of him becoming the deity of the Age of Sigmar setting, he instead unleashed the Necroquake, which kind of made magic go awry everywhere. And now, what is taking place in the Forbidden Power setting or the campaign is that the Necroquake has kind of shown or disrupted the locks and the secret passageways that Sigmar, the good deity, and in quotation marks in the Age of Sigmar setting, hid away. So all of these like tombs and temples and vaults have been kind of
Tombs, you say?
yeah tombs.
Are there kings in those tombs?
Probably not.
Oh,
Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's a whole other topic. But basically, these vaults have been broken in one sense or another, and now everyone kind of can see where these magic artifacts have been hidden. And so, once again, it is now a mad rush for a lot of these armies to get to these vaults and steal the artifacts. And so, with this, there is a new campaign setting where you can play through and do all that. New narrative mechanics like hiring in mercenaries to your force. So there are several armies out there that will basically do anything for payment of one kind or another. And you can hire them in your list. And then there's also artifact weapons or artifacts in general that you can steal from the vaults that will level up with your character through the campaign.
ooh,
So,
very cool.
and these are all narrative missions and all that. They won't necessarily translate into match play. What does come into match play is new endless spells. So there are all these endless spells that are kind of death themed or the vault themed itself. And then there's new terrain. So the new terrain sets are coming alongside with Forbidden Power. I believe the rules just got posted up for at least some of them right before we started broadcasting. And
Ah,
then,
of course.
I mean, as it goes. And then there's also new terrain, new spells, new character settings, all that sort of good stuff. And in the box itself comes with all the endless spells plus one piece of terrain. So it is a lot to it's a lot to add to Age of Sigmar, whether you're playing
Sweet.
narratively or competitively, because these terrain pieces and these endless spells are going to be able to be used in tournaments everywhere. So, really cool.
That's awesome. I'm looking forward to it. Now, we also got to see some more content and images from Warbands. Warband?
Yeah, Warcry.
Warcry. Warcry.
So, we got some confirmation about Warcry, and we got some more information. We got to see the Splintered Fang, which is really exciting for me as someone who likes reptiles. The Splintered Fang is the venom-centered warband, right? So they are the sneaky stabbing chaos guys. Everything is kind of like snake motif. Um, and they're a lot different than the iron golems or the why can't I remember them? The savage ones, the untamed beasts. So
Hmm.
the iron golems are kind of like this big, brutish, heavy metal army. The untamed beasts are your feral, very like uncontrolled chaos. The splintered fang are your posh assassins. So right now we have very distinct war bands coming to this game. And also on top of that, this is the first time ever we have seen a chaos elf. So it's really really cool that they're doing this because back in the old world, elves could fall to chaos and all that, but they never really got like models and things like that outside of Marathi, right? Marathi was the only one who was like confirmed to be a follower of chaos
Hmm.
and an elf, and she just kind of like led people into cults and things like that, and then surprise, they're now chaos. Um, but it's nice to see actual models being rendered that hey, listen, it's not just humans that can fall to chaos; it's elves, and we've seen dwarves and ogres and the Iron Golem, and it's kind of exciting to see what the other war bands are going to bring in terms of the other races. Like, are we going to see once again a return of maybe some chaos trolls, chaos trogs, or maybe even seeing some chaos goblins or orcs? Because at least in
Ooh, yeah.
Silver Tower introduced the Spiderling grots, which were grots that were kind of mutated by the living in the Silver Tower itself, where they're like more spider-like than goblin-like. So all that sort of stuff is very cool. So uh, it is pretty exciting. So
Now, did they say whether or not you could take like other models into Warcry the game?
yes,
Like,
I'm getting that. So Jason, by the way, the Dark Elves in the old world of fantasy mostly abhorred chaos. It was Marathi who was kind of like a secret follower of Slanesh, and she tricked a lot of people into joining these like pleasure cults, and eventually they fell to Slanesh in some fashion or another. But they weren't like wearing the Slanesh glyphs all over them and that sort of thing. Um, Now, yes, there are 6 Chaos Warbands that are coming. We've seen 3, but there's also 9 other armies that will be present in Warcry, and you get to
oh,
use
sweet.
models that you already have in your collection. So expect for, you know, let's say the Ideneth, that you'd be able to use your Namarti, and you might be able to use one of the characters or the elites that you have. Um,
Sweet.
there's also
Any idea on the Shadespire models, the Underworlds models? Because that would be interesting to have the crossplay there.
I would love to see the Shadespire models be usable in Warcry because I think that would be like very thematic. So like, let's say you're doing Caradron. I don't know if Caradron's one of the war bands that can go in there, but you could use the Shadespire war band and then Arcanaut Company, right? So it'd be kind of cool. Um, and one of those things with all that is you get the nine additional ones, and they finally did confirm that with the 9 additional armies, that it is just going to be existing models. They aren't making new models from those armies yet. They did say that there is plans, or that they are at least looking at making kind of like boxes that they did for Kill Team and all that sort of such, where
Oh,
they
sweet, yeah.
like introduced a new model in this box set just to kind of see it going.
Mm-hmm.
So that's all really kind of hyped up. Um,
So exciting. What a great time to be a gamer, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Warcry is coming soon. They didn't necessarily confirm on a release date, but I expect it to be sooner than later. The box set will include the 2 factions, the Untamed Beasts and the Iron Golems, and I expect the other war bands to be released somewhat soon after that, somewhere in
Yep, it makes
Necromunda.
sense to be
Yeah.
June or July because then Sisters could be August/September.
Yeah. So we are getting close to 12. I did want to go over Riot Quest real quick from Privateer Press. Um, Before I take off, we do have people lining up at the door. So, Riot Quest is releasing in August. It is a board game esque game. I know, great wording. It is a board game in which you play a group of looters or opportunists, probably a better way, traveling through a post-apocalyptic setting in the Iron Kingdoms, and you come across a rival gang, right? And so
Hmm.
your your strategy is to gather as much loot or gold or whatever you can um, before you get out of there, right? So you can either play good old fashioned murder ball, attack guys, do all that sort of stuff, or you can play the objective game. Each team consists of 10 models, and these 10 models can be chosen from any of them. So, like, you don't have to choose a faction in it. You just get to kind of choose 10 characters that you really like the look of, which I think is really cool. And it's played on a grid based system, it's all hexes. And it will have a lot of the great kind of like board game aspects that you would expect, like upgrade cards. They have their own dice. They're using the Monster Apocalypse dice, so it's not just like rolling.
Oh, okay, cool.
So it's looking really cool. We're starting to get a lot more information about it, especially the closer they get to release date. Um, and so if you guys haven't looked, we have the Atlanta Riot Quest Facebook group, and I am posting up information as soon as I get it, and I'm going to keep it updated. And I expect it to be a great community here, since a lot of the War Machine guys are going to be getting into it. But really, anyone who plays Monster Apocalypse or even likes the War Machine Horde setting, but you don't want to invest in an entire army, Riot Quest is going to be the game for you, because you get all those same like great styles of characters and models and all that just in a very small package. So yeah, Jason, it's going to
Sweet.
be like Aristia or maybe even Underworlds. It's going to be along that same line where you're playing on a grid, a board, and versus rival gang. So yeah. All right, I need to take off. We got people lining up on the door, but thank you
Yep.
everyone for joining us. We'll be here next week with more info and news and fun stuff. All right,
Yeah. Awesome. Cool. See everybody later.
goodbye now.